In 1925, a novel was published that greatly changed the world of philosophy forever. That novel was called The Trial by Franz Kafka. And if you watch Jujutsu Kaisen, you probably already know what the story is about, since Higuruma's backstory takes a lot from it. Let me explain. See, the trial follows a man named Joseph K, who had a normal life until one day he's arrested by the police. For what reason? We don't know. And that's the point. Because throughout his trial, he's expected to defend himself without knowing what he's accused of. And no matter how hard he tries to defend himself, things keep on getting worse until ultimately he's declared guilty. And it's only after this does he realize he was never meant to win. The trial was just an illusion, and in reality, the verdict was already decided before the trial began. And by the end, Joseph is sent to be executed, still unaware of what he did wrong. Sound familiar? With JJK's many philosophical references, this one is the most blatant. I mean, the trial takes place in a court setting and is a critique of the judicial system. And Higuruma's story follows the same beats and offers the same critique. But why did JJK's author, Gege Akutami, use a story as inspiration? Well, throughout JJK, its story explores how to live in a corrupt world. Whether it be with Gojo trying to reform Jujutsu society, Maki dealing with his zenin, or Yuji dealing with his adversities, all these characters and more are Akutami's way of exploring the different ways of navigating in a world of uncertainty, suffering, and unfairness. Which is why Higuruma's character is so important, because his story also explores this theme, but from a more grounded perspective. And with this exploration and Kafka's inspiration, it's not just a plot device to move the story forward, but a direct commentary of the real world. So in this video, my aim is to explore Higuruma's character and Franz Kafka's philosophy to answer the question of, when faced with the corruption of the world, what do you do? In episode 55, Higuruma says something that really makes us understand who he is as a character. He says,
"The goddess of justice blinds her sight to maintain fairness under the law, and people turn a blind eye to all kinds of things to protect themselves. But I don't want to brush away the hands of people who cling to me for help. The least I can do is keep my eyes open."
The context in which he says this is in response to his colleagues who want to discourage him from taking difficult cases, especially since the likelihood of winning is low, the pay is low, the public resents him for taking such cases, and when he loses, the clients he was trying to help also end up resenting him. But despite these compelling reasons, Higuruma stands firm in his beliefs. He doesn't do this for the money or accolades. He does this because he believes it's the right thing to do. So despite his colleagues' discouragements, it's a strong sense of justice that motivates him to endure all these adversities. And as a result, this characteristic is also what motivates him to take on a case that will change his life forever. Keita Oe is an interesting character because he represents those in society who slipped through the cracks, and his trial is a showcase of how powerful institutions destroy the lives of innocent people. This is because after 2 people are found murdered, Oe is suspected as a culprit, as for 1, he ran away when the police approached him, and 2, the police found the murder weapon at his house. However, even though these facts paint Oe in a bad light, Higuruma still believes he's innocent because underneath the surface lies a different story. For starters, Oe works for a corrupt non-profit organization that embezzles donation money, and as an employee, he is compensated with little to nothing. So given these conditions, you have to ask, why would he work here? Well, the answer is, because he has no choice. See, because Oe comes from an underprivileged background, his resources to sustain himself are limited, so he takes this job not voluntarily, but for survival. And since these corrupt NPOs are greedy, they target disenfranchised people like Oe to exploit. Also, the reason why he got in trouble in the first place is because of this NPO. Because the reason why he didn't turn in the murder weapon sooner is due to the NPO's rule that prohibits calling the police or ambulance to not disturb neighbors. But it's obvious that this rule is BS, and the real reason behind it is so the NPO can protect themselves from getting exposed. Therefore, Oe's employers threw him under the bus so they could preserve themselves. Moreover, Oe mentions that prior to his arrest, he was falsely detained by the police, which traumatized him. So given the story and the bad reputation cops have of harassing poor people, it makes sense as to why he ran away from them. All this to say, being an accused criminal does not necessarily mean you're a bad person. It can also mean that you just didn't have the resources to properly defend your innocence. Because at first glance, Oe's story sounds wildly suspicious. But once you start peeling off the layers, you find an issue that's systemic and victimizes the underprivileged, which is why Higuruma believes in Oe's innocence so strongly. It's because he doesn't see Oe as simply a criminal, but as he truly is, someone put in unfortunate circumstances who just needs a break. To much people's surprise, Oe is found not guilty, which is a relief to Higuruma and his party as they finally achieve justice the right way, through hard work and merit. However, even Higuruma knows he can't get too excited since his case will get appealed. But nonetheless, this victory brings joy to Oe since it signals a glimmer of hope after all the injustices he's faced. And for the first time in a long time, he can finally receive the justice he so rightfully deserves. However, Oe is later found guilty. Even though the prosecutors brought no new evidence against him, he's still found guilty. And as soon as his verdict is declared, he gives Higuruma this look, a look of anger, disappointment, betrayal, hopelessness, fear, and worthlessness. And every time I watch this scene, I get this pit in my stomach, this overwhelming disturbance, as I cannot fathom the pain and anger one must feel after trying to live a good and honest life, only to be sentenced to life in prison for something they didn't even do. And what's worse is that the actual culprit is still out there. So at this point, I'd feel like my entire existence was some divine joke and played like a spectacle. And by witnessing this injustice, it stands to reason as to why it would lead to Higuruma absolutely losing it.
Higuruma, what are you doing?
Everyone come back. We're having a retrial.
What we just witnessed is what scholars call KAFKAESQUE, a term used to describe Franz Kafka's philosophy that attributes life to an absurd and convoluted nightmare akin to a maze. And the reason why he chose a maze as an analog is because their purpose is to make people feel powerless. It's meant to be a complex, so colossal, engrossing, and unimaginably complicated that it greatly disorients individuals and makes them lose all sense of reality. And in the real world, Kafka attributes this kind of suffering to a concept he calls the surreal bureaucracy. Now let me ask you this, have you ever felt like no matter the promises politicians make, your life hasn't changed and probably got worse? Were you promised that if you graduate from college, you'll be guaranteed a good self-sustaining job, only to graduate, be in debt, and enter the worst job market in decades? Were you told that if you get health insurance, you'd get the help you need, but instead, when you ask for this help, you're denied it? Have you ever been told to trust the police only to witness them brutalize your neighbors? Have you ever thought that maybe the system is rigged? Well, if you related to any of the aforementioned questions, congratulations, you experience what Franz Kafka calls the surreal bureaucracy. There's one part in HIGURUMA'S backstory where one of his colleagues says something that I believe is the most important detail throughout the whole thing. She says,
"Quit being a criminal defense lawyer for impossible cases. Trying to save the weak may be a noble endeavor, but there's a limit to what lawyers like us can do without any cooperation from the courts and prosecutors. They don't want to sit and hear a client's sob story. They just want to clear their dockets."
This phrase encapsulates the core of HIGURUMA'S story and affirms Franz Kafka's ideology. No matter how virtuous and principled these institutions present themselves to be, ultimately, they don't care about us. This is why, despite ruining the lives of millions, politicians and billionaires constantly get bailed out by the government and are rarely held accountable. Because the bureaucracy is one big club, and if you're not in it, you're expendable.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
And we see this with Owe's trial, when the judge and prosecutor collude against him. They don't see him as a distinguished human being whose life is sacred. They don't care about his mental health, poor background, or the fact that the real killer is out there. They just want to clear this case so they can move on to the countless others. All in all, bureaucracies have this indifference/apathy towards people's humanity. And as long as they get their fat salaries, promotions, and pensions, they don't care. So with a better understanding of HIGURUMA'S adversaries, I have to ask, when he killed them, did he do the right thing? Philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli says, any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good. And the reason why this applies to HIGURUMA is because he tried winning a game by following the rules, while everyone else was cheating. See, HIGURUMA'S greatest weakness was his naive perspective of the world, because he believed the justice system was held up by integrity, honor, and merit. But in reality, this is not entirely true. As we previously discussed, bureaucracies are self-interested and corrupt. So the fact that HIGURUMA chose to ignore this reality, despite being warned numerous times, is why he lost. So when always found guilty, HIGURUMA'S distress is deeper than just him losing. It's because his entire belief system shattered. He had to accept that the system he put so much faith in was not as virtuous as he thought, and that his conditions were built on corruption. Thus, by feeling powerless after the guilty verdict, HIGURUMA feels the effects of KAFKAESQUE. So by killing the judge and prosecutor, did HIGURUMA do the right thing? Well, I'd say yes, but let me explain why. If you look back to the aforementioned Machiavelli quote and use it to analyze HIGURUMA'S actions through this framework, we can see that although killing the judge and prosecutor was immoral, according to Machiavelli, it was necessary. Because when you look at history, whenever a society is dominated by a corrupt bureaucracy, one of two things happen. One, the bureaucracy gets stronger and more influential, which creates a more dystopian society. Or two, revolution. There's never been a time in history when corrupt bureaucracies have been brought down peacefully or diplomatically. It's always either the elites get stronger or they're violently overthrown. This is why when Luigi Mangione killed the United Healthcare CEO, many people heralded him as a hero. Because even though what he did was bad, the contempt and distrust people have against such institutions is seen as a justification for the violent act. And it's actions like these that lead to massive chaotic protests and revolutions. Because eventually, when bureaucracies become more influential and tyrannical, it comes to a point where people have had enough with their tyranny and want to overthrow them. So although Higuruma was morally wrong for killing the judge and prosecutor through Machiavelli's framework of necessity and survival, I understand his decision. Because he's not just killing them, he's also extinguishing a corruption that has ruined the lives of countless innocent people. But that's it for this video. Since this topic is multifaceted, I decided to split my thoughts into 2 parts. This video is part 1, which focuses on Higuruma and Franz Kafka. My next video will be part 2 and will focus more on the perspective of Yuji Itadori and how it critiques Higuruma's actions and Franz Kafka. So thank you so much for watching this video, and please feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care.